Hi there, welcome to John Broons, the Family Business Guy. Good to meet with you again. I just want to talk today about a little booklet I've written titled If You Were Hit by a Bus, 27 Questions Most People in Business Can't Answer. Good to have you back. So the booklet that I put together, If You Were Hit by a Bus, 27 Questions Most People in Business Can't Answer. It's an interesting thing, this booklet. I put it together principally because a number of people come to me often and say, well, what do I need to do? What do I need to be careful about while running my business? And especially if something was to happen to me, or sometimes it's to mum or dad, especially when we're working in family businesses. So the first question that comes to mind that I think is really important to ask is, if you were hit by a bus, who would go in and open the business tomorrow? Now, you think that's really a simple question, and yes, I know who would go in and open the business tomorrow. But it changes a lot if I say, who should go in and open the business tomorrow? And that's the second question. Because sometimes who would go in to open the business might be a family member, could be a relative, but the person that should go in to open the business, maybe it would be the manager, or maybe it would be the person who needs to open for the tradesmen or other staff that need to pick up equipment or access computers. So there's the possibility that who should open up and who would open up are two different people. Which takes me to the third question. And the third question is, what do you do if those two people, the person who would open up the business and the person who should open up the business, are different people in your mind? We really do strike a problem if we have two different people in our minds. And it comes back to, what is the correct thing for us to do? If you have the wrong person opening up the business on a particular day, then you can open the business to other risks of different people having access to site, different communications happening. Generally, personnel might have different opinions on who should and who shouldn't be allowed into the premises, especially when something of a major tragedy has happened within the family and somebody can't come in, especially the owner of the business.
Right. Do you have a little story around that?
Not that one particularly.
Okay, that's all right. I thought I'd just ask you then. Okay.
The next question that comes up in the booklet is, who handles the money? If you were hit by a bus tomorrow, think about who has access to the bank accounts, what security things, situations you have about money, whether fraud is a possibility. If your accountant writes the checks, is it one signature on a check? Is it two? Do you have cash fobs, electronic fobs that you have to pay wages with? Who's going to activate those? Where do they fall? Especially on a wages day, what can happen is all of a sudden the wages don't get paid if you're not around to activate those payments. It has happened that I'm aware of, where one particular gentleman, he wasn't hit by a bus, but he was in a major car accident and wasn't able to process the wages. And in that situation, it took about 48 hours for it to be resolved. But finally, the pays did go through and the employees all did understand. But it is an issue, especially when handling the money is not just about the wages. Sometimes it's paying suppliers. Sometimes it's paying other people who are linked to your business that you want things done, and you've made promises. How do you keep those promises? And what happens to those promises if you get hit by a bus? There's always the expectation that we're going to be here tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And we very seldom stop to take account of what could happen if. That's the risk. That's the thing that we need to manage. So hence my reasoning for writing this little set of questions to prompt you to work off a to-do list, pretty much, and tick these things off. Think about them, talk with your family or your staff as to who might be the person to become responsible if you're not around. When it comes to the money part, it's a really critical part of your business. Sometimes you might even have a safe in the premises. Safes for petty cash and other pieces of special IP that you might have. Sometimes it's the computer data that you've been storing. Where do those keys go to the safe? There was a story that I might share where the business owner had passed away, and everybody thought everything was fine, business continued as normal. And some months later, the wife of the business owner was packing up his clothes to take to charity. And when she lifted a pair of shoes, a key fell out. Now, it's a strange thing to find a key in a pair of shoes. But if you can imagine, it was a dinner suit, a pair of patent leather shoes, so they weren't often worn. But the key falling out was a bank key. It had a little tag on it, and it was quite a surprise. So this particular lady took it to the bank and said, I have a safe deposit key here, and it's from your bank. We've always banked with you. And the staff person, the individual, said, oh yes, your husband has had a safe deposit with us, and we didn't know anything, so we never mentioned it. We just assumed that he'd passed the key on to you. So when she opened up the safe deposit box to find out, there was a large sum of money and jewellery in this safe deposit box, and she would not have known anything about it because on his passing, or prior to his passing, he had never mentioned the safe deposit box to her. If I go from safe deposit box just to the fact of keys, simple thing, on your tabletop, on your keychain, we carry car keys, we carry house keys, we have keys to the sprinkler box or the letter box, and there's lots and lots of keys. You know what they're for. What about the rest of the family? How many keys do you have that don't have labels on them, key tags written on them, so that if something happens to you, if you were hit by a bus, these are some of the 27 questions that people in business can't answer. If you were to be hit by a bus tomorrow and there's half a dozen keys on your desk and they're not labelled, who's going to know what they're for? Another story, a personal one, a relative passed away, and on the ink blotter on his desk was a lockwood key. We went around the house. We could not find it. This key did not fit any locks. He had another property. We went to the other property. We checked through that property. It did not fit any of the locks. We went to a third place that we thought could possibly be the one. No such luck. We were not able to find what that key fitted. It never, ever was found. And I'm going, it's been 7 or 8 years. We got to the point where we finally had to throw the key away. Now, there must have been some importance to that key. It was sitting in the middle of the ink blotter page of his desk. I still am absolutely stunned as to where it's gone or what particular lock that was supposed to open. Anyhow, I think that's enough for the start of the 27 questions in my book of If You Were Hit by a Bus, 27 questions most people in business can't answer. It's a great to-do list, and you can download it from my website, john@johnbroons.com. And if you want to ring and have a chat about your family business issue, 0433 131 070.
Lovely. So we'll just do an off the camera one day. I'm just going to.
What's an off the camera one? What do you
I'm
mean?
just going to sit right here. You're right. And we'll just see how it runs.
How long was that? Because I've got
10 minutes.
Was it? Was that okay?
Yeah. It's great.
I forgot the next question, so
Did you want to look at the other questions?
Yeah, I didn't know how far I was going.
Because we can just put them in. So in between each question, you can just stop if you like. I can just cut these in.
Okay. So there's one here. What checks and balances do you have in place to ensure those parties pay bills and not themselves?
Still on the money? Yeah, that's a good one. All right, do you want to read that one? Just read it in and I'll just cut that in before you actually did your break.
Okay.
Yeah.
While we're talking about money, there's another thing that you need to really consider in my mind, and that is what checks and balances do you have really about how money is paid? The checks and balances really are there for your safety and security. So the people who, if it's employees who are writing the checks or paying the bills, you really want to make sure they're not paying themselves. There is a case recently where inside a business, a staff member working outside, his wife happened to be working inside in the business, and he would do work. The invoices would be done. She actually, the wife inside the business, was deleting those invoices and transferring the money out of the bank accounts. These things can happen. What checks and balances do you have?
Wow, John, that was excellent listening to some of those questions there. I must admit, when you started on the first question, it brought a real bit of a smile to my face. Who's going to open the business and who should open the business? And you've been around as a family business advisor for a long time. Do you find that when you ask that question, when you're sitting with the family, you get perplexed looks and little smiles like I did?
Yes, I do. Sometimes, well, the larger businesses have structures in place so that there's an employee or management who's structured and there's a process around it. But the smaller businesses where the family's directly involved, there's always the challenge. There's always this question of, oh my goodness, who do I give that responsibility to?
You know, I've noticed that you've got your book, but you've also produced a workbook as well, and you've left lines in your workbook where you've answered these questions. Do you think that did you create that so that becomes an actual almost a working document, like a safety thing for them?
The workbook is a to-do list. The workbook I put together, I've run programs, workshops on this, so people can actually take away a list of practical things that they know they can do. When it's fresh in their mind, they make some notes, they can take it back, and they will remember exactly what they were thinking about when we first prompted the question, and challenge them to think about the issues that they may or may not have thought about already.
It's interesting when you went on there and you talked about the money questions, and you're saying one person gets delayed for paying wages. But this can have huge impacts if you don't have those systems in place. Because you can imagine, what happens if suppliers aren't getting paid? Do they suddenly cut you off?
Generally, most people in business have reasonable relationships with their suppliers. And most people are generally understanding, especially if there's a tragedy in the family. There are sometimes suppliers that are not personable. You're dealing with the internet that wants a particular payment at a particular time when payments are organised through the banks and it needs just a key fob or an OK or a code number typed into a screen. In those cases, there need to be conversations, and sometimes timing doesn't allow for it. The pressure comes on and people react in strange ways.
Do you find that when people work through the workbook and work through the actual booklet you've put together here, and they start documenting these answers, it gives almost a sense of, well, apart from professionalism, and you've actually got all your dots crossed and T's crossed and dots and I's dotted, I should say, pulling over my own words there. Do you find that they can then share that booklet with the key people who are going to be responsible, so everyone's got a copy? Would you be advising something like this?
This is a great little booklet to stick in your pocket or just keep handy. These are questions that need to be discussed. There are even more challenging questions towards the end of the booklet, but these are things that you need to have a conversation about sooner rather than later. Because if we talk about these things, at least we have a concept in our heads, and if we can put a process in place or have a discussion and list some of the things we're going to do, if this risk actually becomes a reality, or if we're challenged by somebody hit by a bus, comes to fruition. These are the things we need to be aware of so that we can act and be clear about what we're trying to do, not just, oh my goodness, what happens next? And the first thing that pops into your mind may not be the most appropriate thing to do.
It is interesting when you say that to me. I'm reflecting on one of your questions you slipped at the end there, towards the end, is are you sure the person who's paying the bills aren't paying themselves? I mean, and you mentioned that the booklet is a real good prompt to put processes in place, and that's a very, very good question, isn't it?
Look, money is a challenge for everybody. That's what we track. That's how we measure our business. That's how we measure our own worth. So it's critical that we have the right systems and the processes around the money side of things. If we didn't have cash, money then becomes, and we could go cashless,